Welcome to this week's meeting of the Rockland Board of Selectmen, coming to you live on WRPS from the H. Bernard Monahan Memorial Room at Rockland Town Hall. Among the items on the agenda this week, we've got stormwater, report from the Fire Station Building Committee, and appointments. Now here's the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Larry Ryan.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, September 18th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Mullen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for Mary Lou Boyle, who worked at our library for years. Thank you. Now, first order of business under community announcements is a holiday stroll update by Pam Murphy. Come on up, Pam.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
This is all of the committee that can make it tonight, so it's what you get. Despite there was some stories out there that we were not doing a stroll this year, but we're definitely doing a stroll this year. It's going to be November 24th, Saturday, November 24th from 4 to 7 p.m. This year, we're hoping to make it bigger and better because our good friend Bob Biggins, who was on the committee with us, will no longer be there. So we want to make it bigger and better for Biggs this year. Everything's in place. We have the fire department, the police department, the highway department, and of course the park department. And we've already met at the town hall. Marcy, we thank her for the information that she was able to give us. Our site will be up hopefully tomorrow, if not tonight. So anybody has any questions. I know one big issue is the lighting up town. And Scott Duffy, the fire chief, and Dave Taylor, the highway department, have already said that they would be happy to work on lighting, and they thought they had some leads on that. So if anybody has suggestions or ideas for the stroll, please just comment on the site, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Okay? Thank you. November 24th from 4 to 7.
Very
Thanks.
good.
Thank you, Pam.
Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to it. Second, under the community announcements, is a presentation to Chief Scott Duffy. And I get a letter here from Tanya L. Hoover, Superintendent of the National Fire Academy, U.S. Fire Administration. And it says, Dear Mr. Ryan, please accept my sincere thanks for your support of Captain Scott Francis Duffy during his participation in the U.S. Fire Administration's National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program. Captain Duffy has now successfully completed the program and is and the acquired applied research. On behalf of the NFA, the enclosed EFOP certificate has been forwarded to you for your formal presentation to this dedicated member of your department. I respectfully request that you present the certificate at a formal ceremony inviting your community's elected officials and member of the local media to attend along with Captain Duffy's family. This is an ideal opportunity to celebrate the department's commitment to its personnel and to demonstrate the success of its members. The Academy appreciates your commitment to this 4-year program and your continued support for the NFA, and that's signed sincerely, Tanya L. Toomey. And Scott Duffy, come on up, Chief. Yeah, we can stand up in front of everybody. Okay. What's my hang up?
That's it.
That's it. Anyway, congratulations, Chief. You did a great job. I want everybody to know when everything was going up in the North Shore that our fire chief was there, spent the night for a couple days up there and helped them out and helping to bring these problems to bear. And quite frankly, this guy is very high up in the eyes of all the fire department people across the state of Massachusetts, and they're looking forward to the day that he leaves this sancted hall and joins their ranks someplace out where he can make a big difference. And I know that day's coming someday when that young lady gets out of high school, but you know, Chief, thank you so much. You're a great guy.
I appreciate it. 4 years of very hard work. I'd just like to thank my family, my wife especially, for the boring nights of reading my papers. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations again, Jeff. All right, where are we? All right, next one will be the minutes of the open session minutes of July 10th, 2018.
I make a motion to approve.
I abstain.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
And the open session minutes of September 4th, 2018.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
I'll get a motion in a second. All in favor? That's a vote. The executive session minutes of July 10th, 2018.
I make a motion to approve. What do we typically say? Whatever
Not to
that
be
phrase is?
released?
Yeah,
till all matters
not
are
to be
settled.
released until all matters are settled.
I abstain.
I'll second that. All in favor? That's 2-0, and one abstention. Let's see, where are we? In the executive session minutes of September 4th, 2018.
I make a motion to approve whatever that language is we typically do. Sorry,
There you
it's been
go.
a long week.
There you go.
Thank you.
Second.
I get a motion in a second. All in favor? That's a vote. On the agenda items, we have a stormwater update with Sewer Superintendent John Laughlin and Highway Superintendent David Taylor.
Good evening.
How are you?
Dave and I were asked to come and give a brief update on the status of the stormwater in the town of Rockland. There was a lot of fanfare and hoopla during the annual town meeting in May, and we were requested to update the town as to the status and where we stand as far as the notice of intent that was filed and our permit that is pending, or that's actually due. So with that, I want to introduce Natalie Parmesan. It's ironic that we're talking about stormwater today with the events of last week and today in particular in the town of Rockland. Stormwater affects everybody. And so it's with great pleasure that excuse my voice, that I introduce Natalie Parmesan, who's been our consultant engineer since 2004 with the Environmental Partners Group. So we've been working hand in hand for the last 14 years with environmental partners to get stormwater into compliance, and we feel like that we're there now. We have reached compliance. Natalie?
Thank you, John. Yes. Okay. Good evening, I'm Natalie Pommersheim. I'm a senior project scientist at Environmental Partners Group, and I've been there since 2004 at the beginning of this stormwater permit with EPA. I'm just going to wait till this boots up. But I'm going to give you a brief permit background on the MS4 program with EPA and DEP. Also, what is an MS4? What does that stand for? What does that mean here in the town of Rockland? Who is involved in town? What departments? The year one requirements and what is due in this next fiscal year. The permit structure, and then just some brief water body assessment and some sampling that we have done to date this year. So this is the topics to be covered this evening. The regulatory background, it all started back in the 90s with phase 1 of the program. The EPA was looking to improve the water quality of the water bodies in the state and all over the country. And they started with large cities, so Boston, Springfield, Worcester. That was the first phase. And then in 2003, they said, you know, this is working. We're seeing improvements with our water quality. And we're going to start a phase 2 program, and that's the smaller MS4. And what that looks at is census data. So it's your urbanized area. So some towns like Rockland are 100% covered. The whole town is considered urbanized, whereas other smaller rural towns only may have a portion of their town that's covered under this program. So the first permit came out in 2003. It was intended to be a 5-year program. And in 2008, there was drafts and revisions and reiterations of what was coming, and that went on for 10 years. And there's been appeals of the program. Last year it was supposed to come out. It was stayed for a year. So this became effective this year, this July of 2018. And there's some new water quality requirements this time around. It's looking at known issues in Old Swamp River, French Stream, Studley's Pond, and the whole South Coastal watershed has bacteria issues. And even though you may not be causing the issue, you may be contributing. Just a little bit is contributing to that issue, and it's looking for towns across the state to take an action on it. So what is an MS4? It's the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. Any drainage, all catch basins go down to pipes under the road and discharge to a stream, a wetland, a pond in town. So today, when it's pouring rain, all of the pollutants that are on the roads, parking lots, lawns, are getting, are precipitating and going down into the catch basins that are then discharging to your outfalls. It's not going to the treatment system for the wastewater. It's not a combined sewer, and it also includes any swale or ditch along the side of the road. So according to the annual report that the town has been submitting to EPA and DEP every year, these are the departments that are part of this program. But the sewer department with John Laughlin has really been leading this effort since the beginning. And even though it's been in flux for the last 10 years, we've continued to submit our annual report, continued to sample outfalls, continued to take water quality samples just to stay ahead of this program. So since it is in effect in this year one, the notice of intent to gain coverage under this program is due by the end of this month. We have a draft that I've prepared in the folder that I've provided you today. But basically, it's just looking at, who is going to be the responsible departments, how you're going to go forward with this program. There's going to be a stormwater management plan that's going to be due by July, an illicit discharge detection and elimination program also due by July, some bylaw and ordinance updates just to make sure that you have the authority, if you were to find a discharge, that you can disconnect and get rid of that. Also looking at the O&M program of the highway department and some other things, fiscal department issues that we'll just have to take a look at. So with the notice of intent, it is due by the end of this month. The town is seeking coverage. It outlines the town's program over the next few years, and we'll just give a detailed department on who is responsible for meeting these requirements. So the permit structure, there's a new component of it this year is the water quality based limitations. So that's a special condition because there's a known impairment. So you just have to focus on those impaired waters and make sure that you're taking actions to reduce those pollutant loads there. And then the minimum control measures is to reduce pollution to the maximum extent practicable. So these are known efforts that have shown reduced pollution in the past. So it's looking at public education and outreach, getting things up on websites, social media, in the schools, public participation and involvement, get the public to comment on the stormwater management plan, take part in some sampling, detail your illicit discharge program, how you're going to have a systematic approach to reduce these discharges. Some construction and post-construction bylaws and ordinances just to make sure that you're reviewing your site plans, making sure that construction sites aren't running off sediment into the storm drain system that then would be putting sediment into your water bodies, etc. So just a quick look at some water body assessments. There's, as we've mentioned earlier, Old Swamp River, French Stream, and Studley's Pond has known identified issues, so we would focus on those outfalls that are discharging there and work up the drainage system. You're also part of 3 different watersheds based on your topography, but mostly in the South Coastal watershed. Just a little bit of the north part of town discharges up to the Boston Harbor. And this has all been studied by Mass DEP. They have historic records of all their sampling data, and that's available online if you want to delve into that further. So this year we've done some outfall sampling, and we have been doing outfall sampling since the permit began. We've gone out to 60 outfalls this summer, and only 3 of those 60 were flowing, which is good. If there's flow during dry weather, that means something's going on. So only seeing 3 out of 6, that means, there wasn't really a lot going on at that time of our spot check. So we'll be looking to go out and do some more, but based on the laboratory data of those outfalls that were sampled this summer, they appear to be clear. We will also be targeting a couple different surface water locations throughout town just to take a look at their quality at this, because since the permit is starting, we want to get your baseline of everything going forward so we can say, no, Rockland is not contributing to this issue. We have all this sampling data and we're good to go. So my comment and my contact information is here. But basically, with the notice of intent that's due at the end of this month, we just have to make sure we have a department that's going to be the lead, and we'll need somebody from administration or the Board of Selectmen to sign off and submit on behalf of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I think that Dave wants to.
Just to touch base and reiterate some other things that we've been doing to try to catch up on some of the MS4 permitting. I know the selectmen set up another account this year under drainage, so we had a $50,000 line item to do some of the maintenance. What we've been doing is we have holies coming in. They've been backing and jetting some of the drainage systems through town, finding out the problem areas, and we're coming up with solutions. One of the solutions was from Moncrief Road. It's been a heavy flooding area for probably 20 years, and environmental partners helped us do an initial design on that, and we put that out to bid, and we're actually going to be working on that and doing a large catchment area to try to get us in there so we can maintain that area a little easier. By doing the vac and the jetting through town, we've eliminated probably 20 problem areas that we've had for the last 20 years. Some of those high areas were Manzella Court, Concord Street, John Dunn Drive, the French's, what is it? French Road. So that's still a problem area. That one out of probably the 20 problem areas. But we've eliminated a lot of the flooding issues that we've had by doing this, and it also lets us find out where the problem catch basins are in the drainage. Combo effort. John's been leading on the cleaning of the streams. There's 31 designated streams through town that have been hand cleaned. So we're not allowed to bring in machines or heavy equipment to do this. So we hire out companies that literally go into these streams and they clean them by hand. So it's not an easy task to find a company to do that, and we've been lucky that we can do that. The other area that we worked on was through the DCR. We got permission through the DCR to do the dam cleanup on Studley Pond. So if anybody's noticed, we cleaned the dam area. We got all the overgrowth and everything along the shoreline, to try to keep the dam in a little bit of a better shape than it has been. Those are just some of the areas we're touching on our department. We've been working with as far as the sweeping issue. Through the MS4, we've been taking the sweepings, and we have a drying area up there, and what we do is we cut those up with underlayments, and we're using them underneath our walkways or some of our road projects that we have. So that way we don't have to ship them out for a higher price to get rid of them. So we're trying to get a little proactive on it, and with what Natalie's been doing since 2004, and what John has. I'm literally a latecomer to this. I've just been doing it for 2 years, and I'm just glad to be able to be a little bit of a help. So I think that's about it. Do you think of anything else, John? Or?
Oh, that's very good. Dave's been an enormous help to get this program to where it is today. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any questions from the board?
Oh, two things real quick, Dave. The $50,000 that was allocated. I remember when we did it, the $50,000, kind of like a ballpark.
Because that was part of what we wanted to do. Is we wanted to set up initially some sort of department. I mean, for the future, this MS4 is a large deal, and literally, it's going to be an undercoming where we're going to have to set up a department where this is going to have to be managed. You're going to need employees. I mean, Natalie's done. How many outfalls have we tested? Was it 60?
Just 60 this year.
60 this year. So that has to be done, and then we're going to have to maintain these outfalls. I mean, they're going to look at them and see what we have to do for work. So as far as the maintenance, I mean, you could literally have a department cleaning catch basins year-round. Mm-hmm. We just don't have it. So we're literally subbing that out to holidays. Ideally, if you have vac and a jet, and we have 9 areas in town, we'll have, as of this year, we'll have 5 done. So once we get around that, then you can maintain it with a catch basin truck. Mm-hmm. But to try to get those guys out there where we have everything else going on, it's nearly impossible until we can kind of man that. I mean, we started out with 50,000 this year. I know we went to finance, and I've also talked to the selectmen. I mean, this is a department that we're going to have to build up every year.
Okay.
So this has been forthcoming since 2004. I mean, we're in 2017, 2018, 2017 is where we're supposed to, you know, get into compliance, and we've got bumped a year. So, you know, we're not late to the party, but we also, you know, we've been lucky enough that John and Natalie have been, you know, proactive, and they kept, you know, everything going. So we're a lot better than a lot of the other towns out there. But just so, you know, the residents know and everybody knows, this is a department that we're gonna have to, you know, set up, and it's gonna be its own little dealings. You know, we're gonna have to do that. I mean, John's retiring a year or so, and hopefully he'll rethink that, and we can hold on to him for a little longer as we do this transition. But you know, it's one of those things where it's been coming since 2004. It's here.
Yep.
So you know, it's something we're gonna have to deal with.
Oh, that's like the other point. Like, I just want to like quickly, I'll make over the past year. Maybe some people have had the perception that, you know, nothing has happened with regards to stormwater here, and I just want to, really thank you, like, for reaffirming that actually this effort has been a priority, and to, like, if there was any question out there by whoever it is, I just want to thank you for, you know, what you have been doing for the past 14 and more years, and like everything. I mean, like Dave, your work, John, your work is incredible. I remember we met on an early Saturday morning in January down on Moncrief Road, and so I know that situation well. So
And keep in mind too, it's also, and I know I've touched base with the selectmen and also finance, and John knows this too, and also Marcy, that, you know, as we're doing the roads, I mean, you know, we have to start allotting a certain percentage of that to do the underground infrastructure, which is which is drainage. So if we don't do it now, we're going to go back. We're chasing some of it now in some of the areas where, you know, these are letting go. They're giving out, and we're coming back, you know, to roads that were done, you know, a few years ago or even 10 years ago. So we're trying to be proactive. I mean, you know, when you get into a road, like I'll just take Central Street for example. I mean, that got to be a very expensive road because we did all the drainage. You know, we had to hit all the drainage to do it. We're in there doing curbing, we're doing sidewalks, we're doing a brand new road from start to scratch. It makes sense to do it now. So, you know, we're using a lot of, you know, the budget, you know, a lot of the Chapter 90 and a lot of that drainage money, you know, to update these things. So, you know, so that's, you know, that's where a lot of that money's coming to us. So we're trying to be proactive on that. So, like I said, it's just so everybody knows this is here, and you know, we have to kind of deal with it. So, any other questions? Or
Nope.
all right.
Great job.
Thank you.
Guys. Appreciate it.
thank you, Natalie.
Next on our agenda is the Fire Station Building Committee update.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
Here tonight with us, so tonight we feel was the time that we've gathered enough information from the Fire Station Building Committee to report back to the Selectmen ad hoc committee that we are to report back to you on the potential for a future fire station. The committee, when formed, we decided to sit down, our first couple meetings were to sit down and look at sites around town that would fit a fire station. The criteria we had that we worked with was a fire station that would remain in the core center of town, a site that would accommodate a fire station, and a site that was already town-owned, so that we are not incurring costs. So looking at the core center of town, you know, within that probably 1 square mile of the center of town, due to responses, you know, being able to keep our responses to the smallest possible time that we had, we came up with 3 sites as a committee to look at. The 3 sites were the McKinley School, the Lincoln School, and then the current fire station. We hired an architectural firm, Schwartz Silver, out of Boston, and their resumes and so on are in your book. And Schwartz Silver contracted with Robert Mitchell of Mitchell Associates out of New York, who, when I saw the name, I was very excited because, you know, growing up reading the fire magazines, they always do fire stations. And this gentleman wins awards, the top awards every year for fire station design. So for a small town like Rockland to get Bob Mitchell, I was ecstatic. So very hard work, hours upon hours of work have gone into, you know, studying and programming and what a fire station is going to need. One of the other criteria was we're looking at a fire station that's going to last 100 years. Something that's not going to be, you know, a 40-year throwaway. Also, we had to think about what's the fire department going to look like in 100 years. As you just heard, Rockland is a very urbanized area. We are full. Our call volume continues to rise and increase. So keeping that in mind, we designed the fire station for a fire department of the future as well. One thing I will say, with an urbanized area, we are looking at areas of neighborhoods. No matter where we put this fire station, we will hear complaints. But I think what we have as a committee and what we have to do as a town is think of the greater good for the 18,000 of the town. So that being said, I'd like to introduce John Traficante from Schwartz & Silver and Stuart Marshall. Gentlemen, and Bob Mitchell. Where's Bob? There's Bob. Sorry. So gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So we're each gonna talk about a little bit of this. Right?
Oh, yeah.
As the chief noted, we've been asked to kind of do a feasibility study for the new fire station, and and as he also introduced us, thank you very much. John Traficante and Stuart Marshall, we both are at Schwartz Silver, and Bob, of course, is at Mitchell Associates, located in New York. Bob has got a very long kind of list of credentials, including over 100 emergency service facilities, over 50 feasibility studies for fire stations like this, and has been, as Chief noted, recognized in the Fire Chief magazine multiple times. So we've worked with Bob on a couple recent projects, one in Newton, a fire station in Newton, Central Fire Station in Newton, and also in Walpole, Massachusetts. So we've been teaming with Bob for, I think we figured over 4 or 5 years, 5 years about now. So we have a great working relationship with Bob. Schwartz Silver has been working with Massachusetts, has been doing public work in Massachusetts for over 37 years. We've done libraries, fire stations. We did the Wellesley Fire Station in the mid to late 80s. So we've been working also on public work in Massachusetts. So bringing Bob onto the team it just made perfect sense to us. His expertise really has kind of helped us kind of get to the best design for a fire station possible. What this study is really, what we're going to update everybody on tonight is we're going to look at kind of remind everybody of the conditions that the current fire station is, or the firefighters are working in the existing station. Some photos of that. We're going to talk a little bit about the programming process. Bob's going to walk through the process that we spent with the department, figuring out exactly, and when we say programming, we're really talking about the size of the rooms, the adjacencies of the rooms, the separation between the different parts of the building. The fire stations have apparatus bays. Everybody's familiar with where the trucks are parked in the apparatus. But they also have all the support spaces that go along with that, in addition to public spaces where the public is welcome into the building. So we'll review all of that. We're going to take that information and then we're going to apply it to the 3 sites that Chief mentioned to see which site is best suited for the program. We're going to look at a plan development. So we actually have floor plans with, boy, it's got everything. Desks, chairs, tables, beds. So this is a floor plan that's really been put together with as much information as possible so that we know we're making the rooms the right size. And then finally, look at some conceptual design massing studies. So we've started, we have a site that's been recommended, and we're going to look at ways of putting a building on that site. And I'm going to say right now, what you're going to see is going to look like a building, but it's really about the massing of the building. We are not at a point where we're schematic design. That's a phase down the road. So these are going to be the initial ideas of a design on a site. So everybody's familiar with the outside of the building. The building was originally a 3-bay station. In the 60s, it was added on to and became a 6-bay station. Unfortunately, when they added on, they kept all the apparatus doors the same size. And these are by today's standards, very small doors. So we learned that any new apparatus that's been ordered has to be custom ordered to fit into the current doors. So things have to be, the ladder truck, everything had to be lowered to get into these spaces. So in the new station, we would have much larger doors, 13.5 by 13.5 high, or 14 by 14 high. So those are the size doors we're talking about. These are more in the order of 10 by 12s or 12 by 12, I think. The other thing to point out is on this side is the gear locker with the fire engine right next to it. So these are the lockers that the firefighters use to hang their equipment. There's literally enough room for someone to kind of walk past these by the side. And these are things that need much more space to function properly. This is the ready room. The ready room is literally where the firefighters kind of hang out and on call for kind of responses. This space is currently in the apparatus bay. It's not separated, so any of the contaminants that come back with the trucks on the fire and get pulled in are directly adjacent to these spaces where the firefighters have to hang out. Storage situations where SCBA bottles, so the air tanks that they use are directly adjacent to things like cleaning materials. It's just not enough space in the station. A vintage 70s kind of kitchen. I honestly think I had that same countertop as a kid with pots, but again, very undersized. Bathrooms, you can see the shower stalls on this side. But in the stations we've done, I would honestly have to say it's one of the stations that probably needs more work than any other station we've ever done. So, bunking areas, firefighter lockers, personal lockers. So that's just to give everybody a sense of kind of the condition of the current station. So I think it's pretty obvious that there's a real need for this station. And so Bob's going to go ahead and walk through some of the programming.
Hi. So I just would like to reiterate a couple of the points that John was saying about the conditions in the station. I'm sure you've been hearing in the news about cancer in the fire service. You know, is there anybody who hasn't? I'm not sure. So it's a serious issue that needs to be addressed in the station. I mean, some of what's going on is exposure at the fire scene, but a great deal of what's going on is exposure back in the station. You notice the sitting area was in the apparatus bay. It's in a contaminated space, and they eat food there, and they hang out there. So there's a hard and fast rule in the design of fire stations that you have a hot zone that is hermetically sealed off from the living space and the office space, and there's an intermediate airlock space that we would call a warm zone. So that's being addressed. There was a picture that showed the narrow space around the truck. These are hazards where people are injured in these spaces. When the alarm goes off, everybody's in a hurry. It's easy for there to be an accident. So what are our priorities in the development of the design? Firefighter health and safety, the ability to train to be A, safe, and B, better at protecting the community. And the third thing is the ability to do what they need to do effectively and quickly. You come back from a call, you don't know how quickly you have to go back out. So it has to be easy to turn things around. And this whole thing of contamination, everything that comes back to the station after a structure fire or a car fire is contaminated and has to be treated as contaminated. And I'll show a little bit about how we approach that in your station, and each station is different. Usually it's the constraint of the site that creates the differences from one station to another. The basic needs are all the same. Place to put the truck, place to put out their protective clothing, place to clean everything, place to sleep, and so on. Okay, so the process starts with a series of meetings, and this document evolved from that. It's called the program. In some other trade, it might be called a user needs analysis. It comes from interviewing. There was a committee of 8 people that worked, and we had 7 sessions, no, wrong direction, where we ground through room by room all of the requirements of each room. And for each room, there is a detailed diagram. John was mentioning the level of detail. You can't necessarily see it from there, but for instance, in this room, we know the 2 types of compressors that are here and the cascade bubbles. And every room is like that. Here you see decon laundry, the washer extractors, the drying cabinets, the gross deconning area, residential style washer and dryer for lighter garments, counters for zipping the liners out of the coats. There's nothing here that isn't a result of a pragmatic purpose. And I want to focus on that because, as you've heard, I've done this for a while. Every station, there's the question of why is it this big? And then you invite people to come and say, well, let's go through each room and tell me which room you would eliminate or diminish. And you end up with the same building at the end of that process. So we're happy or willing, I shouldn't say happy, we're more than willing to participate in any kind of undertaking like that to evaluate the design. There's a training room, meeting training room that's divisible. You can see 2 different versions of how it's used. And then you get a spreadsheet that tells you the size of the building. And the building ends up being, in a perfect flat site of basically a square site, it would be 30,500 square feet. In the linear site that it's on with some changes of elevation, it ended up being 3% larger, 31,460 square feet. Okay. Stuart, who's picking this part up?
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll talk some more later about that decontamination and that operation.
So, site selection. Now that we know the magnitude of the station, we need to find a way to evaluate the 3 sites that we were asked to look at, compare them to each other, see how suitable they are for hosting a fire station. You can see the 3 sites highlighted here. I'm sure you're familiar with them. We have number 1 is the existing fire station site. Number 2 is it's on Union Street. Number 2, just north of the existing fire station, is the McKinley School site, currently used for the Youth Commission and daycare and some other programs. And then site number 3, the Lincoln School site, is currently unused but owned by the town, and that's just off a couple of blocks away from Union Street, along the intersection of Church and Howard Street. So that's number 3. Okay, the fire station site. Just generally looking at this, you can see how close, as John described earlier, you can see how close the bay doors are to the sidewalk. There's not a lot of room on the site. There's not enough room to pull fire trucks out, to back fire trucks back in a safe manner. That's something we would hope to accomplish and resolve in a new design. There's very little room for parking on the site. And we know already that the apparatus bay is undersized. So just looking at the site itself, this is the outer perimeter is the property line of the site. Union Street is on the right-hand side. The dash line is the outline of the existing fire station. So to that, we simply add 2 things. First is a ramp that is long enough to pull the largest ladder out of the apparatus bay. without it being out in the street. The block behind is the size of simply just a six-bay apparatus building. And you can see how much of the site just those two things fill. And to that we add apparatus support, administrative space, public space. Now these are just the footprints of what would really be a two-story building. So even stacking them, there's really no way to get, even if we eliminate the apparatus ramp and shove the apparatus bay forward, there's no way to have any support spaces for the apparatus. It really needs to be on the same level with those bays. So the site just visually you can see doesn't work. So another way we'll look at diagrams of all three sites, but something else that we use is we developed this matrix of criteria, and it's very simple. There's a list of items that would be critical to the operation and fitting the station on the site. We then, each criteria gets labeled red, green, or yellow. Red obviously being something that not favorable for the site, yellow something to be cautious about, and green absolutely fine. So just I won't run through these on all three of them. Maybe just touch on some of the tougher items. But on the first one, program footprint. Can the site actually support the required first floor footprint? Obviously, this site it cannot. Site frontage, is the front of the site wide enough to host 6 bays? Yes, we saw from the diagram that's true. Ramp area, is there room on the site to have a full ramp in front of the bays? Not the case on this site. Apparatus configuration, bays here are limited to back end. It's favorable to have, it's best to have at least a couple of bays that some of the larger vehicles can pull from the back through the apparatus, rather than backing it every time, so they can come straight through and then out the front again. Can't do that in this case. It's not red because it's not something we have to have, but it's preferred. Parking and public access. In this case, there is no room for the buildings, never mind parking. Open space, same issue. Site level. In this case, the site not being level can cause issues, programming issues, where you end up with a strange configuration if it's more than 1 story difference from front to back, where you're trying to, it makes it difficult to get program elements, again, that have to be next to each other to work. So in this case, the site is level. That's fine. Location, response time, the site is located in the center of town. It's easy access right onto Union Street. Residential impact, the site in this case would be as it is now. It's a municipal property. It's right on Union Street. Environmental restrictions, there are none. Demolition, we'd require the demolition of an unprotected historic building in this case, but there is some cost associated with that, and that's really the reason for yellow. Existing program displacement, we'd be replacing the fire station that's there. This would require building a temporary temp ops on another site somewhere else, which can be expensive to use during construction. And ownership, property acquisition, the town owns this property already. So that's the first site. I won't go through the exhaustive list every time. But second site, this is a McKinley School site. Again, it's on Union Street down at the bottom of the image. There's parking currently out front. The school is used for the youth commission and for daycare, and there's some other activities. You can see the gym in the back. That's over a story drop from front of site to the back. There's parking currently in the back. I'll discuss in the matrix, but that area, the area at the top of the image, there's kind of a treed alley back there. We have not found official documentation of wetlands, but the site's certainly wet back there. And if this was a consideration, we would want to look at that more carefully with our engineering team. So let's look at diagram, same diagram for this site. So again, Union Street's on the right-hand side. The dashed outline is the McKinley School. Here we are again with the ramp and the apparatus bays. So there's room for the ramp, obviously. There's room for an apparatus bay. And at the back, support, admin, public spaces, again, access from this lower level at the back. And so really, I mean, just looking at this as a diagram, you can see it's actually, one thing that's not great about this site is it's really unsafe for the public to be turning into a drive to the side of the apparatus ramp when vehicles are pulling out in an emergency. And it's actually quite a narrow means of accessing the lower portion of the site, which is where the public would have to get at the fire station. Same matrix, some of the tougher points here, apparatus configuration again. This site really is limited to having back-in only. For parking public access, there is off-street parking possible down at the back. But again, the access is limited to a narrow slope drive adjacent to the emergency vehicles and the ramp. Open space, obviously no room for open space on the site after we put parking in. Level, the site has more than a one-story drop. This makes access to the rear difficult, and it has the potential to compromise program adjacencies to really use the site. Environmental restrictions, again, there's no wetland restriction that we have found, but I think it would require some further investigation. Demolition, this really is a sticking point. We'd be asking to demolish a protected historic building. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. I think that's hanging on the wall there. The town is proud of the building. Another strike against the site is displacing the current programs that are there. We'd have to find another place for the daycare, for the youth commission, and the other tenants. That's it for the McKinley site. The third site is the Lincoln School site. Church Street is on the right-hand side, heading up to Union. That's the wider of the two streets. Howard Street runs along the bottom. The school currently is sort of perched in the middle. You can see just from the image how much bigger the site is than the other two. It's certainly a lot bigger than the existing fire station site, and a bit bigger than the McKinley School site. And it's mostly level. It has a bit of drop in the back down to the existing playing fields. So again, same diagram. You can see the existing building. You can really tell from the scale of the ramp and the apparatus bay on the site that there's a lot more room here to work with. And again, the apparatus support, the admin, the public in the back. It leaves lots of room for parking. In fact, as we'll see as we move forward in the presentation, room for open space, playing fields, that sort of thing. So the matrix here, a little easier to look at. Some of the ticks here, residential impact. The site's currently a municipal property in sort of a mixed-use area. I'd say Howard Street really is that bottom edge of Howard Street becomes fully residential. So it's in a neighborhood with residences. Howard Street's narrow, Church Street is wide. In terms of demolition, to use the site, it would require the demolition of the Lincoln School. So it's an unprotected historic building. When we see all three together, I think you can sort of see, just squinting at this, that the Union, the Lincoln School site is certainly the easiest to deal with in terms of hosting a fire station. John, do you want to?
So kind of with that information in hand, we proceeded with the Lincoln School site to test that site for the program. We developed the plans, and we looked at some massing on that site. Actually, before I go forward, one of the things that we looked at when we were kind of starting to zero in on this site was actually the area between Union and Howard Street. As Stuart mentioned, to the east of Howard is pretty much all residential. There are some anomalies. There are a couple of large buildings mixed in, but for the most part, it's residential. The area kind of between Howard and it jogs to Wall Street is got a mix of buildings. There are single-family residences, there are multifamily residential, multifamily residences, there are businesses, there are kind of large brick flat roof buildings, there are large pitched roof buildings, there are large wood frame flat roof buildings. It's a real mix of things. And so kind of with that, we wanted to recognize the area that we're kind of working within. This again is zeroing in on the site, Howard at the bottom, Church Street to the right of the site. And you can see this is the Lincoln School. The current fire station edge comes to about, programmatically, comes to about the edge of where the hill is before it rolls down into the field, into the playing field.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Where would you, where would you put the fire station down? One of the concerns I know that with the residents is to back it up against those houses on the top side there, or the west side of the street. I mean, if the station was turned in the other direction, would it still fit and would it still be able to function and give those people some breathing space or a buffer zone, if you will?
The people at the back of the site?
Yes, right there,
Yeah. So that's a great question. It's actually kind of the next sequence of things we started to study. So we've got now some basic programming that says this site is probably the site we want to start to focus on. And then the next step was to actually break that programming down. And we did a number of these bubble diagrams. And you can see we had some where the building was kind of arranged at the front of the site, all the way back to the backyards of those residences. We had pulled it the full length of the site. The one we settled on was something that really hugged the edge of Howard Street so that we could push the face of the fire station on Howard and then turn it onto Church so that all the apparatus would exit onto the wider street. It's also the street closer to, response time-wise, closer to the downtown. But this allowed us kind of a buffer zone between the residences, which are back here, and the program of the fire station here. And we'll talk a little more about it because the next slide are actually Bob looking at the plan. So once we started to figure out the basic arrangement of the site, of the building on the site, we then kind of, it's a back and forth, very iterative process of design where we kind of work back and forth between site and programming and plans and input from the committee. So, this all, I think we started this in November of last year. Mm-hmm. So this has been going on for a while, and there was at least 3 months of programming before we even started to get to this level. Mm-hmm. But in this diagram, just to point out some of the things that we were really trying to make sure that we had, first is the emergency response onto Church Street. Mm-hmm. The second is to separate the public entrance and the vehicles coming in from the public from that response point. So we didn't want anybody visiting the fire station to have to cross or come anywhere near the exit ramp, just a safety issue. The third is preserving some community outdoor space on the site. The site's large enough, and we simply have it diagrammed at this point as a court surface. It could be a playground, it could be a number of different things. But right now, it's a placeholder for open space for the community and neighborhood. And then tuck the parking behind here, program it so that the firefighters can come in and park on the back side and use the back part of it as a training area, kind of protected from view of the street and the neighbors behind. We also added a fence or pretty much a wall across the back edge to separate those activities from the neighbors behind them.
Is that in the top left corner?
So we're also kind of placeholders for things that we know we're going to need on the site. I think those are the generators in this case.
Generator, yeah.
So the generators are right up against.
Yeah,
the
but those,
residents.
honestly, that's something that we would finesse. And I'm saying at this point, we were just looking for places to put things on the site, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Because,
we should really move
yeah,
by
we had the
the,
generator back
yeah.
here, but the generator makes more sense closer to the building for economic reasons, honestly. You gotta run big, heavy copper cable from the generator back to the
And what
station.
about communication towers?
Communication tower.
Yes,
Would that
it's
be-
associated with, well.
I think that would be at the end of the,
Yeah, we were
Part-
honestly
part-
thinking about the
yeah.
communication tower kind of more central, closer to the building side rather than the residential side.
So that it's a short pathway for cables into the building.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the next slide, I'm going to let Bob kind of go through. So once we got to kind of a basic building arrangement on the site, we kind of turned it back over to Bob. That bottom one's a point.
Okay, great. Okay, so the basic organization of the building on the site has the apparatus bays opening out onto Church, and 2 of them are drive-through bays, so we're showing the ladder there, and the rest are back-in bays, and they're double deep, so it's definitely second due, if not stored, vehicles in the back part of the bay. And then off to the side, we have communications, we have a ready room. Back to the question of a place for people to sit. It's a sanitary room, it's, gasketed and separately ventilated. We have EMS storage. We have a line here that differentiates the apparatus bay, which is essentially a 20-foot high, 1-story space, from everything else, which is 14-foot floor-to-floor, 2-story space, okay? And so we have firematic officer spaces here. We have, in this area, I'm going to show you a detail of it, it's decon laundry, taking very seriously the whole issue of being contaminated. At this end of the building, this end of the building's down 4 feet, as I recall, to follow the contours. And this is the publicly accessible space, or the space that they're using for, well, first off, for their own training, or for mutual aid training. What happens, in my experience, when you have a compliant space like this that's available for training, all the other departments that they're going to work with on mutual aid want to come here and train. So, and then vertical circulation to the upper floor, which has, let me go to the upper floor and I'll come back to that. We have living space on the upper floor, okay, bunking, day room and eating, living, exercise, and then what I guess you would call the senior administrative space, so that the chief actually has a view down into the bay from here. This is a mezzanine. Now, within the 20-foot roof structure of the bay, those spaces that were underneath, which were storage spaces, would have an 8-foot 8-inch ceiling height, hard ceiling, and 8-inch thick floor deck, so that there's a mezzanine at 9'4". So that fits under the roof. And the mezzanine is used, certain equipment is stored up there in this end room, compressor room. There's training that occurs up there. There's a section, it's mostly railing, because that's part of the definition of a mezzanine, it's open. But there's a section of wall here with a framed window, and they can practice bailing out, which is getting out in a hurry when there's a flashover, and rappelling, and confined space extrication, mask confidence, which is an entanglement. What do you do in the dark if your air hoses are all caught up on something? How do you get used to the idea so you don't panic? Things like that. Training that can occur in the building instead of going out to a training center, which means it's not done on overtime. It's done in the course of a normal day's events. It's done whenever somebody says to the chief, I don't like the way that worked out last night, we should practice this. Or I don't feel comfortable about something, let's practice that. Or coming from the top down, you guys really need some practice on this. So that's how that's all set up to be. Now let me go back at one. It's not advancing. can you do it from the projector, from the left?
I'll do it, John.
Yeah, just the back one. Okay, so this is very dark, it's hard to see, but I was talking about hot zone, warm zone, cold zone. It's very well structured for that. There's a very clear delineation between them. And the yellow is basically the airlock separations. So for instance, if somebody is showing up to work and they're parking back here, they come through this warm zone and they go in. This is a tower ladder, it's a training tower, and it's also means of egress to the second floor. There are 3 ways to get off the second floor. This back stair, which is direct response to the bay. There's the front stair, and then there's also a pole, which is direct response to the bay. Okay, so if you go to the next, and then one more. Okay, here you are on the second floor. It's all cold zone, except for that slab, which has the access points to the tower stair or to the pole. And then red is, there's no direct passageway into the red area other than to step out onto the platform where the pole is and go down. So the pole drop is only 14 feet, which is important. In the older fire stations, the living space was over the bay, so it was a larger drop. And there's issues about safety and velocity and all that. A firefighter is supposed to control their speed. They always control their speed until the day they didn't control their speed. So we're limiting the total drop to 14 feet, and we feel that that's a good approach. Next. Okay, I'd like to talk, can you see these well enough? Okay, because I brought hard copies of these illustrations. This is what has to do with the decon process. Okay. So they can come in off the back apron. They can come into this space where they can strip out of their turnout gear, assuming they still have turnout gear on. The new method is it's called the clean cab. You don't get into the cab from the fire scene with your turnout gear on. It gets bagged up and put in a compartment on the side of the truck, and you have clean clothing, theoretically clean clothing to get into. So if they've come that way, they bring the bags in this back door, and this is the space for gross deconning. So there's a chamber here where things can get hosed off. You can't see it here, but you can see it in the next image, 3-chamber sink. And the table for stripping apart the turnout gear to get the liners out. They have to be washed separately from the outer shell. And then in this space, you've got the washer extractors, drying cabinet, a residential style washer and dryer for the headgear. And then across the hall from here is where the turnout gear is stored. So you have the ability to come back out this way with freshly washed turnout gear, or continue up this way to a hot zone shower. And so the whole thing about cancer is a constantly moving target at this point. NFPA I take it back. City of Boston has taken the lead on a lot of the setting of criteria. You should take a hot shower within 1 hour of returning to the station from a fire scene. Now, firefighters can go upstairs and shower in the bunking area, but if there are people on callback, you're going to want to have them not going into the bunking area that they're not bunking at the moment, maybe. So we provide a hot zone shower. This is just another view of it. You also have your swift water activity here, which is accessible off the back apron, and here is all of the equipment for maintaining the site. This is a mechanics workroom. Here you see the pole coming down off the second floor. These spaces here are firematic storage, equipment storage. So the idea is on the apparatus floor, there's nothing but tires and feet. There's some place to store everything so we don't have trip hazards and the resultant injuries. Okay.
So the last part of this is the massing and start of conceptual design. And again, just to kind of orient everyone, this is the current layout, apparatus, firematic support, the kind of community space, parking, and then a path across the back with a wall separating from the back properties. So one of the things that we always do, and this is because we want each fire station to be unique to the community that it serves, if this is the site that's selected for the fire station, we wanted to understand the buildings around it, new, old, and somewhat old, and at different scales. So currently, this is the Lincoln School site. If you go to the next slide. The first building we looked at was kind of across the street diagonally, which is a new apartment building. But one of the reasons we wanted to look at this was simply because it's a rather large building in the same community with the same adjacencies to neighborhood. And this is a three-story building on the street that steps up and becomes a fourth story at kind of a penthouse level. And a fourth story down at that parking area. So this is a building that's significantly higher than the fire station. But what's interesting about it is just the way they started to deal with the scale of the building. And the stepping back is something that we took a cue from. We think that it's important for our building to fit in with the buildings across the street on Howard Street. So the idea of kind of maybe stepping the building off of Howard so it's not a two-story front on Howard is something that we looked at in our studies. The second building we looked at was a little further up the street on Wall and Webster. It's the Verizon building and also the Webster Park Rehab Healthcare Center. But these were interesting to us because they were kind of brick structures, flat roof brick structures in a neighborhood that's pitched roofs, wood structures. And there is a certain interest to a kind of eclectic neighborhood of these types of structures, scale and form. The third building is just half a block away. I don't know the original use of this building. I suspect it's an industrial use building. You can go to the next slide. But this was interesting because we saw this roof form show up in a number of different places, this and the sandpaper factory. Mm-hmm. And this is a very simple turn-of-the-century way of getting natural light into the center of large buildings. We have a large building. We have and by bringing, they've now termed it sustainable daylighting. But this is not something new. And in fact, the orientation is north, so you get north light, so you don't have any direct sunlight coming in, but you get kind of daylight washing the interior of your building. So we like that idea, and we are looking for ways of making this new fire station fit in with the neighborhood, so the scale of the fire station and maybe even some of the character. The last one we looked at was, again, not very far away, just around the corner. It's the sandpaper factory, which has been converted into, I believe, offices and maybe even residential. Or is it just offices?
Offices and artist studios.
Artist studios, yeah. And well, it's interesting because these are like perfect artist studio type of spaces with a northern light. So again, you see this kind of set back roof structure. So it's a taller building, but it's set back from the edge, getting natural light into the center. Also monitors across the back that elevate the building as well. So these were all some cues we took as we started thinking about the mass. And I know I've said it already, but we're going to show you some images that look like a building, but I want to be very clear that this is at a feasibility study level. And the problem with our technology these days is you can create things, as Bob showed in that diagram, that look like they're hyper real. I mean, you had gear hanging in the gear lockers in that diagram. So there's a level of detail that we can create in kind of the simulated computer world that sometimes preempts the real design of things. So I'm just saying that because these images, they look like buildings. We've got windows in them, and we've got surface materials kind of represented even. But they're really just about massing and trying to fit the structure in. And there is a year, 6 months of design after this that comes to develop this architecture. Okay, so just to reorient everyone, this is kind of Howard, and this is the site, Lincoln School site, Howard and Church. And I think just to point out, similar slide, we started thinking about ways of getting light into the apparatus, so we're not always lighting it, artificially. We can bring some daylight in. Also, maybe a monitor across the center, which is corridor space in the center of the plant. So bringing some light into the corridor of the firefighter living areas. We've shown a basketball court again, but it could be any kind of, could be green space, could be tree, could be park space. So those are the main features here. And so this is just a simple animation of kind of moving around. So oblique perspective is very strange. But turning the building slightly, we'll turn it again. But just to point out, ideas of public entrance here, so the public can come in, park, accessible spots, and then enter the fire station at this point. Firefighters would park along the back or kind of in this courtyard space. And again, the apparatus bay exiting onto Church Street here, Howard Street here.
John, explain the one-way side alley.
Yes, sorry, that's a good point. I haven't said that yet. The firefighter parking would come one way through here and across the back. This would also be the return for any of the vehicles that are located in the drive-through base, such as the ladder truck. So the ladder truck, instead of having to come down Church and try to back into its spot, can come down Howard, one-way street, kind of a signage here would say firefighter or fire officials only or something like that, but would come down here and then pull into the bay here, parking into its spot. Okay, and again, we can't tell you that this is a brick building or a stone building or a clad building, but just to kind of represent it as a terracotta colored building right now. But one of the things that we were looking to break down the mass of it, we did a couple of things. We wanted to separate the functioning kind of fire station part of it, so the apparatus and those support spaces in the front, from the kind of residential. So this is where the firefighters live, up at this level, and with administration on the edge, and then public and administration on the lower section. So really thinking about trying, first of all, in plan, to separate it into two pieces, so the scale is a little more manageable. And then secondarily, to, from an elevational standpoint, to kind of step it from one story back to 2 stories. So the residential isn't pushed right up against the edge. It's stepped back away from the street. So on the street edge, that front edge is actually in scale with the front facades of those residences, which are primarily turned perpendicular to the street, which is classic historic architecture. So those, and then creating kind of a nice buffer zone and a sidewalk that connects this whole edge. Go to the next one. So this is, and again, very diagrammatic, but the idea of kind of glass, possibly glass doors that with the fire engines and in the apparatus visible from Church Street, but a more opaque kind of brick facade that comes down, and then you can see it step back away from Howard Street. So thinking about the context of the 2 streets, Church Street's a little wider with some larger architecture on it. Howard Street is more residential, smaller home-style residences.
I'd like to throw in another point too. Because of, we're very concerned about, especially when we talked about the other sites, about trucks being in the street when they're trying to back into the bay. This arrangement allows a wide and deep apron so that there's very little time that the truck is actually out potentially in front of them.
So the next, and I'm just going to go through this quickly. These are, we had some preliminary cost estimates done, and we looked at site improvements on the site. So this includes all the landscaping and such, as well as the community court space and the building itself. Go to the next one, and then go to the next one. This is just the backup. And then just to say kind of, the next steps for a process like this is first, Massachusetts law requires an OPM to be hired. And then we would move into a schematic design, which can take 2 to 3 months. Design development, which can take another 2 to 3 months. Construction documents, which 4 to 6 months. And then bidding and negotiation. So you would bid this job out to GCs. There are sub bids involved in that, and that would then allow a contractor to start work, and we are estimating that, on the safe side, that it's 18 months of construction. It could be a little less than 18 months, but fire stations have been taking between 14 and 18 months for the stations we've done recently. Okay. Any questions?
I just have one. My wife's the executive assistant to the fire chief. Want to make sure she gets a nice little corner office up on the second floor, picture window overlooking Union Street.
She's going to get a beautiful office.
There you go. Just thought I'd kiss you in, Mary.
So, Mary's the most important person at the fire station. We all know that. I'm not saying that because Larry's on the board. They could care less about Larry, so I have to say that. So Mary's gonna have a great office. But what I do want to say is that I know the neighbors have concerns, and I fully appreciate that. But no, this is in my neighborhood too. I live just a quarter of a mile from them. We pass this site every day, whether I work there or if I don't work there. So, the Rockland Fire Department, its goal number one is to serve the public. Number two is to be a good neighbor. The fire station has always been a place to go to if you need help, if you have a question, kids to get their bikes fixed. They're old cliches, but it really does happen. So we want to be a good neighbor, and rest assured that we will be good neighbors. I understand the neighbors' concerns, and I do appreciate those concerns. Not cold to it. Over half of the fire departments are over half the firefighters are town residents. So they do appreciate it. They want to be, this is their community. They don't want to be looked at in a bad light. So, I did want to say that for those neighbors that are here and that do have concerns. And number two, we have a long process. We still have to request funding and try and find that. And if anybody has any ideas of any other locations in town, we are all ears. But again, I'm trying to minimize the cost, be fiscally responsible, but also plan for a future and give a state-of-the-art fire department. Police department was a new police station about 20 years ago. New highway barn about 15, 20 years ago. Brand new high school, brand new middle school, renovated high school last year. I think it's the fire department's time. Half our building is 40 years old, the other half is 80 years old, with 80-year-old systems in it. So, those are my thoughts, and granted, they're very biased thoughts on my part, but I thank the architects, Bob, John, Stewart, thank you very much. You guys have done yeoman's work on this. The committee has done a ton of input, and I appreciate every hour they've spent away from their families helping with this. I will say that, when we do pick a neighborhood, and I am going to ask the selectmen in a few minutes but when we do pick a neighborhood for this, to have neighborhood representatives on the committee. By no means do we want to isolate the neighborhood, but we would like the input of those neighbors. So I would like the committee, for a vote of support for the Lincoln School site. And as a committee, I 3 and not a 5. I know you do have decisions to make, and I know there's your concerns that you've expressed over the months. But that's what I do ask at this time. Gentlemen?
Mike, I guess I'll begin. And full disclosure, I have served, I think, for the past 2 years as a member of the fire station building committee. And when we began, actually, 2 years ago, I think next month it was, Chief, first of all, we toured the current fire station. And at the second meeting, the chief was exactly right. We actually went through the whole Union Street, down to Market Street, area. The area that is really considered the center of the town in terms of where the in terms of a realistic and a safe response time for Rockland residents. And And short of taking any property by eminent domain, or short of interfering with a whole bunch of things, we ended up with 3 sites. And, you know, like ideally, we would have had more sites, but the amount of land and available area that the town owns within this area is very limited. And when we approached this whole thing, I had no idea, frankly, what our site I really liked the most. I mean, like, I actually like the site of the current fire station the most. It's, you know, it's right in the heart of our community, like a fire station should be. And, you know, I mean, frankly, I grew up at the fire department, and it was just always been the heart of Rockland. I mean, it's where all the parades, you know, all congregate around. It's just, you know, it's just really the heart of our community. But, you know, like, we went building by building, and, you know, the results, you know, and frankly, the architects, in their experience, pointed to the direction or to the conclusion that we have this evening. And like, we have, you know, some really helpful information. I think we have a building that could really work. I think we also heard, you know, a whole lot of resident concerns at the last town meeting, which, you know, I think going forward in whatever way we do, we have to make sure we educate the public. We have to involve whatever neighborhood that a new fire station is in, because I really do believe we need one. But we have to make sure we communicate with residents and with neighbors what the real realities of what we're dealing with right now are. Like, I can attest to the fact, I mean, you know, firefighter and occupational cancer is a huge issue right now, and frankly, it's hit home for me, and that matters. I mean, I know for a fact that when firefighters have lunch and dinner, 90% of the time they're probably having it, breathing in exhaust fumes and carcinogens from our turnout gear. And that's frankly, this is 2018, and that's just frankly not right, and we should be doing something as a town about that. But that being said, in terms of a specific site, how we got here, and the work we have ahead of us, you know, this project, I mean, it's a proposed just out of the gate, like $18.5 million project. And I think, number one, we need to know how we move forward in terms of do we move forward in trying to allocate funding out of an operational budget, for example, to hire an OPM and to get more information, or do we decide on some type of consensus to include the cost of an OPM like in like the big overall picture, and just ask, you know, really do a like a really educational campaign about like an information to residents about what we really need in a fire station, like, and go for it like all in one. I think that's an open-ended question, but I, for one, given the fact that, frankly, I think as a board we have a lot to do, like in rebuilding, frankly, the trust of Rockland residents, I think 2 things. I think we should, in a month and a half, when we have a new 5-member board, you know, this, one of the first things we do with that board, with our new board, is have this conversation like with residents in amongst 5 people rather than 3. You know, this is, you know, like a major our decision. It's how we're going to move forward, and I think we should make sure that, you know, we do have the decisions and the wishes of our 5 selectmen and residents going into that. Although one thing also as a taxpayer that I'm also mindful of is frankly coming up with a plan. I mean, like in the fire stations at the latest one, and we see the clear need. But I mean, we have the fire station, we have other buildings. I mean, like, and I agree with the chief. This should be at the top of our priorities. But from a taxpayer perspective, today it's a fire station, tomorrow it's a school. Like after that, there are issues with, I'm hearing eventually that our sewer treatment plant is going to need an upgrade. We have issues at our community center. So one of the things in short, and I promise I'll stop talking, but so one of the things in short, when we have our 5 members and like we're able to actually have conversations as a board now, which is amazing, but to actually come up with a strategic like facilities plan in terms of how we might be able to address like all the needs we have. And frankly, the needs we have are overwhelming. And to look at ways maybe to finance it, maybe to look creatively in terms of seeing what we have in terms of bonding capacity to to handle more of that in-house within our current operational budget. But on short, I mean, like, I understand completely how we got here in terms of the Lincoln School site. Like, I believe we got here for very good reason. But again, just before I think we move forward as a board, we should move forward as a 5-member board and, and making sure we have some direction from at least 5 people sitting up here. So that's all I have. I mean.
No, I agree with Mike. Chief, thank you. Thank you. To your committee, you guys did a great job putting this together. To the architects, I mean, this has been a lot to digest, and it's easy to get excited about. And we have to your point, we have a responsibility to the members of the department for their safety. We have a responsibility to the residents in those neighborhoods. We have a responsibility to the rest of the residents of our town. To that point, it has been a lot to digest, and I think it's something that we should do our due diligence as a board and get out into the community and hear what they have to say in those neighborhoods. I mean, I think the last time this piece of land was discussed, it was at town meeting, and we were discussing about just taking down the building, and it was overwhelmingly voted against us taking down the building. So there's clearly some passion behind that property, and I think it's our job to make sure that this is the right site, and in which case your hard work wouldn't have gone to waste. And I agree with Mr. Mullen. I think asking a 3-member board when we have 2 potential members coming on board in 2 months, I think it might be better suited for us to just table the vote until they're on board. And that's not to take away anything that you guys have done. The presentation was excellent. It was very thorough. It was more than I could have expected. It was excellent. But to that point, again, we also have the responsibility to the residents and to hear what they have to say. So,
And just the board, keep in mind, we're a community of 18,000.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
And no matter where we go, you're going to have residents.
Absolutely.
So, but again, in that being said, that's not to, say anything bad against or the current neighborhood that we're looking at. But again, anybody have any other ideas, any outside the box plans or thoughts, we are open.
Sure.
And none of this has gone to waste. The good
Yep.
thing is that, Mr. Mitchell's programming and John and Stuart's architectural layout design can all be modified. The programming was the big part of it.
Yep.
What do we need for a 100-year fire department? So again, I understand the board has concerns over the size of the board and coming on and so we're good. I just want it. I have to do my due diligence and get it out there.
And we appreciate it. I think you guys have done an excellent job on the presentation and everything that you guys have done. But to Mike's point, we do have 2 members coming on board in 2 months, and to take this decision out of their hands at this time may not be appropriate. So, Mr. Ryan.
That'll be nice, yeah. Anyway, I'm with the chief on this. I also am on the school committee building committee because I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and that's one of the people that have to be on there. And quite frankly, we just dealt with this same issue the other day. And they had 9 spots, of which 8 were useless. There's only 1. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of space without having to making it, spend $2 more million to tear down a building or buy up some buildings and then we got to tear them down to make the space and stuff. Becomes very difficult. I know that residents in the area contacted me, and one of their issues were they don't want anything really butting their property, like the gas, the generators, or anything like that. And I can understand that, but there seems to be plenty of room to move everything, I mean, I like the way it's up against the street, so that back wall that's on the west side there was, with a barrier also could make it a quieter thing. I mean, sometimes we have to decide against people. I mean, we had to do it at Union and Hingham and Market Street years ago when we put the lights in there. We had a big fight about that. The worst thing that could ever happen to the town of Rockland, we were told. It wasn't. It was a good thing. Saved a lot of cars from being wrecked. A lot of accidents were at that spot. So we'll see when we get our other 2 members on, Chief, what they want to do and stuff like that. But there's not an awful lot of space to put anything in Rockland, especially something as big as a fire station, something that needs to be centrally located. Yeah, you want to put up the base, and you're on Beach Hill, and your house is on fire, or somebody's sick. It's going to take them how long to get there?
10 minutes from the base.
There you go. And so, I mean, all that stuff has to be considered. Anyway, thank you guys for a great job.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Bob.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Bye.
Stuart. Thank you
We'll
very much,
also,
Ron.
I'm gonna also make sure I
Thank
get
you.
an
Good to see
electronic
you.
copy of this
Nice job.
presentation,
Excellent job.
so that we can get it on the town website.
All right. Number 5 on the agenda. I'll let these guys clear out or get their stuff together. Is the FEMA Assistance to the Firefighters Grant. An announcement. Chief Duffy.
Sorry, I know you guys are gonna be sick of hearing from me and seeing me, but I'm very excited to announce I got a call from Senator Warren's office. I got a call from Congressman Keating's office that with notifications that the Rockland Fire Department was successful in obtaining another Assistance to Firefighters grant. These are very competitive grant process throughout the country. Probably 70–80% of the fire stations and fire departments across the country apply for this grant. Very limited funds. The funds have been being decreased each year. However, we were successful for a $90,000 grant to replace our extrication equipment. That's the Jaws of Life. Currently, the Jaws of Life, they're tethered to the fire apparatus with hydraulic hoses and hydraulic reels and hydraulic generators. The grant will allow us to purchase state-of-the-art electronic equipment, battery operated, which is much more mobile, carry it away from the vehicle. So it gives us a greater chance at saving someone quicker and more efficiently in the cases where they're needed. Unfortunately, that is one of the things we do. But I have to thank Firefighter Oshry and the Rockland firefighters, the union, the local union. They take this grant by the horns and they go after this grant. I usually, I don't have to do anything with it until the very end, maybe, manage the budget of it and sign my signature to it. They do all the hard work on it, so I do appreciate their hard work. This is probably since, I want to say 95, this is probably our 7th or 8th grant, and we're probably close to $3 million in grant funds from the government. So we're responsible for a nickel for every dollar we spend. So we're a little bit just under $4,500, responsible for $90,000 worth of equipment.
Excellent.
So I just wanted to announce that and, thank the guys that applied for it and did the hard work to get it for us.
Thank you, Chief. Excellent.
Thank you, Chief. Take your minutes well.
Thank you for your time tonight. My show is over.
So you done?
All right, now, speaking of grants, we have Wayne Darrow here from Community Development to talk about a grant that we're getting, and I'm going to read this letter that we got from the Department of Housing and Community Development. Dear Chairman Ryan, on behalf of Governor Charles Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, I'm pleased to award the Town of Rockland an fiscal year 2018 Community Development Fund grant in the amount of up to $745,000 from the Massachusetts Community Development Block Grant Program. Congratulations on being one of the successful applicants. And that's all you need to read. Wayne, you're doing a great job.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just here to talk a little bit about the grant and some of the steps we need to take on our end to really get the ball rolling. The first one was we received a contract from the Department of Housing and Community Development. I know Marcy coordinated the signature of that and it's been sent back to DHCD. Have we received the fully executed copy back yet?
I believe we received the fully executed contract just yesterday in the mail.
Okay. Check mark number one, good. The next step has to do with the environmental clearance. There are a couple clearances we need to go through before we can actually start to expend funds. First one is the environmental review clearance. As part of the grant application, we did the initial preliminary review. We now need to go one step further and advertise our findings. In order to do that, it has to be done under the signature of an environmental certifying officer. The environmental certifying officer at the time we did the application was Alan Chaka. We need to designate his replacement. I've suggested that the board designate Marcy as the environmental certifying officer so we can complete this environmental review process. So I have the motion from the board to nominate Marcy Birmingham as the environmental certifying officer.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to make Marcy Birmingham the environmental person. All in favor? Congratulations, Ms. Birmingham. You get another star.
One more thing on her plate.
Multitasking.
There you go. There you go.
The next step we need to take is we need to address the special conditions in the contract that was sent to the town. Department of Housing and Community Development has a series of 6 standard special conditions that relate to any of their grant awards. We're very familiar with those conditions and we respond to them on an annual basis. But there were some special conditions in Rockland, some additional special conditions. One of those was adding program income that the community has from prior grant years to this grant. There's been a real change at the state level in how program income is handled. In the past, the Department of Housing and Community Development used to let you hold on to it and accumulate it. That is no longer their policy. They are now requiring you to include it in an active grant and spend it before you start drawing down on that grant you were awarded. At the time we did the application, Rockland had $100,000 in program income. We plan to add that to the grant, $72,000 for additional housing rehab loans and $18,000 for administrative fees. So I need a motion from the board to add $100,000 in program income to the grant.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? That's a vote.
Great. And just so you know, we'll be posting the notice of intent to request the release of funds, which is the next step in the environmental clearance process this week. We've got to wait 12 days, then we can submit that to the state, and there's another review period. But I suspect by mid-October, we should have our environmental clearance. We'll send out the special conditions letter tomorrow. That clearance should be also ready by the middle of October. So I'll coordinate with with Marcy to advertise for the town to procure grant management services for the FY18 grant. And hopefully,
Excellent.
hopefully the town can have everything set up and ready to go by November 1st.
Excellent.
Okay?
Just a quick question on that, Wayne.
Sure.
Like, once all of that happens, would whoever, like, is the grant administrator, like, be able to come back and to share with us and with the town exactly the types of programs and process that is actually being offered?
Sure, I can give
For
you
the
most of that
grant.
information right now.
Okay.
We just did a single activity grant this time. It was only for housing rehab. We budgeted to do approximately 26 units of housing rehab. And something that's different from the past, all our prior grants were targeted. Department of Housing and Community Development removed that requirement from the grant program. So now this program will be available town-wide. And I know we've had a backlog of applicants from folks who were not in the original target area. And also, there were probably folks who didn't submit an application because they knew they weren't in the target area. So we'll get applications up on our website and hopefully distribute them in a couple of locations throughout town. And I don't think we're going to have any trouble mustering enough demand to meet that goal of 26 units.
Thank you.
Okay?
Any more questions?
No.
Well, good. Thanks, Wayne. Doing a
Thanks,
great
Wayne.
job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, number 7, school payroll procedure. Ms. Birmingham?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the board asked me to put this agenda item on your open meeting tonight in order to have a discussion about rescinding a school payroll procedure that was put into effect on May 15th.
Do you remember that night, don't you?
I do. I remember it quite well. So the other night, last Monday, the school committee voted to rescind this draft of payroll procedures, processes and procedures between the town and the school department. I agree with the school committee. They made a point that there's different people, different personalities involved, and at the time, although I didn't agree with everything that was in the draft, we voted it as a living, breathing document that we could go back to and change if needed. So I think, to follow the lead of the school department, the school committee, I think I'd make a motion that we rescind the school payroll procedure draft.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion and a second to rescind the draft. All in favor? That's 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 8, appointments. One is the Open Space Committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have an appointment application from Pam Titus. I don't know if Ms. Titus is here with us this evening. She's interested in being appointed to an open seat on the Open Space Committee. As you can see, she's a retired school administrator and has been a counselor and a teacher, and she's interested in volunteering for the town.
I'll make a motion to put Pam on the committee.
I'll second.
All in favor? That's a vote. Welcome aboard, Pam. Next is Community Preservation Committee, and we have Peter Park, who's
Some park things.
yeah, he's tending to the park things right now. Peter Ewell from 298 Webster Street wants to get on the committee. We originally didn't put him on the committee because we thought there'd be too many park people on it, but he, quite frankly, has assured me that his name is Mr. Rockland first and not Mr. Rockland Park first, so that he knows what to do and he's willing to do it. So what's the will of the board?
Make a motion to appoint Mr. Peter Yule to the Community Preservation Committee.
I'll second that motion. I will say, I did share that concern. There's a very heavily park influence on that committee. And Pete's done a great job, and I'm a big fan of his. And to that point, this has been an open seat for a while, and nobody's applied. And I do trust Pete to make sure that he does what's right for the town. So
I had a long talk with Mr. Ewell. I talked to him on a number of occasions. I expressed our concerns, and he assured me that he'll work for the best interests of the town and not the best interests for the park, because it's not just the park, it's a whole bunch of things. So, do we have a motion?
We got a motion and
A second, all in favor? Welcome aboard, Peter. I know he's out there somewhere. Now we want we got the environmental certifying officer, we made her.
Yes, we've already taken
So
care of
we're all
that
set with
appointment.
that. Okay. Moving along to number 9, Youth Department update and special municipal employee designation request from Jean Blaney. Hi, Jean.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Good. So I'm going to go through my summer recap real quick. Well, sort of quick. It's been a busy summer. But first I'd like to thank all of the departments in Rockland. The Youth Commission Department, for those that don't know, we actually touch almost every single department in the town. So everyone has assisted in some way or another, from the Parks Department, Highway, Fire Department, Police Department. Like I said, it was a busy summer, so I appreciate everyone's help. Would also like to thank the Rockland Men's Club. They donated $500 towards our summer program. This actually allowed 3 teens to attend our teen program, which was great. They had a great summer. These teens were considered at-risk teens or didn't have the funds to attend our program, so that was fantastic. Vincent Fontaine's family also generously donated 3 more stalls. So we have changing stalls for the kids to change into their bathing suits, and we just didn't have enough. So Vinny said my family would like to donate more stalls, and he went and he built them, and they're there, and they're awesome.
We didn't have that when I was there, jeez.
So we had that. The increase in our programming too, they came in very handy. So on average, given that on average up at Hartsuff Park this summer we had about 120 children. So that increase was probably due to our teen program that doubled this summer. So we're very excited about that. The kids had a great time. They played in the field. They were even in the water, which teens usually don't do, so that was kind of exciting. And we had all sorts of activities. We went on field trips, but the most exciting day for me and for a lot of the kids, these kids come to our summer program. Most of them, it's all summer long because their parents work. Some parents work 2 and 3 jobs. So we work with the parents for the kids to come all summer long. The fire department got their hands on a bubble machine, and I know you guys have pictures, and nobody else does, and I apologize. Maybe next time there'll be a slideshow. But it was an amazing time. The kids had so much fun. We had cotton candy and popcorn and really made it a fun environment for them. And I think the firefighters had a great time doing that as well. Chief wasn't there. He was on vacation, but that's okay. We had to increase our staff by 3 people. Our staff is top-notch. They return every single year. Some of these people have been with us for over 10 years, our staff. So they love their job. Their overall spirit is contagious for both myself and Casey and Patrick. So they should be extremely proud. They also got a really nice compliment from another rec director that we know and was a previous town of Rockland resident. He actually said that he loved the pictures that I post on Facebook, the videos, everything that the councilors do, and I have to give them all of the credit because it's all their ideas, and he said they must love their job. You have an amazing staff. So for me, that was the highest compliment anyone could have ever given. Patrick, we had our NFL flag football program, which was great. We ended up having 70 participants. We had the coaches that were volunteers. So that was amazing. And then, sorry, lost my spot. So next summer we will have flag football again. We had an outside basketball program. We tried to run it for everyone. We were very successful with the teen boy program, but we're hoping for more next year. And then we've since learned that you don't run anything once football season starts. You just have to end everything. And then we had our top secret science, which went very well. And also challenging soccer, which was twice this year, and I believe we only had it once last year. So a very busy summer. And like I said, thank you to everyone that helped out, and my staff included. So as I've spoken to some of you, Patrick Dempsey has left our department, so we're in search of his, someone to take over his position. He did most of our gym programs and then worked on other miscellaneous programs like the flag football, the basketball, helped out with Challenger soccer and some other things. So we're looking to replace him, but in addition to that, my board has asked me to write a letter to the Board of Selectmen to request that our department become and I'm going to get this wrong because I didn't highlight it, but a special municipality what is it?
Employee designation?
Yeah, special employee designation. Okay, so it's somewhere on my sheet here. So there were several reasons for that. We had actually a pretty long meeting and a long discussion over it. What that means is that anyone so from what I understand, what it means is anyone in the town that works for the town can come and teach a program for the youth commission. The only thing is if they work over 40 hours, I would have to pay them time and a half. And in most cases, that's not a problem because those fees would roll into our programming. And I've since learned outside vendors, which we haven't used for almost 2 years because Patrick's been with us. So outside vendors are getting somewhere between $30, $50, and sometimes $60 an hour to teach a program. So we've been able to keep our costs down by having Patrick on board, but I do believe, what teachers, educators, and other people that work for the town, by them coming to us and teaching these programs, they're not going to go over their 40 hours. Most of them work 32 to 35 hours. Some of them are part-time employees.
How does that work during the summer for teachers?
Most of the teachers are not working during the summer.
So, yeah, but it's not, no conflict at all there?
No.
So do we have to make everybody a special employee, or just whoever's working
This
that
department.
job?
The department.
The department.
The
To
department?
be eligible for special municipal employees.
So what that means is if I hire somebody to come into our department, and they worked for somewhere else in the town, let's say they worked for the school.
I know the concept, I just wanted to make sure it's a legal thing to do.
Well, I think we've,
So we did explore this some with Town Clerk Shortall and looked at the charter, but I might recommend that the board, that I run it by Attorney Clifford for the board. I'm not sure if he has arrived. He was coming tonight, but I don't see.
I don't see him yet.
He was here.
He's probably here, but
he's in the office.
So I would recommend that maybe we run it by Attorney Clifford and vote on this at the next meeting, just to make sure we've covered all of our bases.
that works for me. I
Yeah.
just rather,
Yeah.
make sure that
It is,
it's all spelled out properly so that we don't get hung up anywhere.
sure, I agree, Mr. Chairman, completely. I know this is important to Jean because she runs into the staff shortages quite a bit, and to individually appoint employees to be special employees becomes time-consuming because she needs to come in front of the board every time. But
Right.
let's just make sure the legalities are covered before we make the decision.
And I like seeing you guys. I'd come every single time.
Yeah, please do.
We won't even,
There you go.
So I'll make a motion to table that until our next meeting.
Second.
The motion
Be October 2nd.
Tabled, special municipal employee designation request. All in favor? That's a vote. Thanks, Gene.
Thank you.
Jean.
We'll straighten you out. Number 10, Town Administrators Report and Correspondence.
so I will keep the town administrator's report short. It's getting late. I just have the same announcement that we announced at the last meeting, which is that the Zoning Board of Appeals is still seeking 3 alternate members to sit on the board. They would really appreciate residents who are interested to come forward and fill out a committee interest form with Town Clerk Shortall so that we can fill those seats. And we had one other resignation letter today. We regretfully accept the resignation from the Finance Committee of Mr. Allen. I believe that Bill Allen has served faithfully on the Finance Committee, even as the chairman, for quite some time, and he's very sad to submit his letter of resignation, but he has some other commitments that have led him to feel it's time to do that.
Yeah,
So,
Bill was,
thank him.
Bill's been on the committee for, I want to say the better part of maybe 8 or 9 years. 10 and a half now.
He'll be dearly
So-
missed, I
So
think.
Bill, when I got on the board, he was the chairman initially, and Bill really was the person that really fostered in the transparency and working with the town departments in that manner to establish a budget. And, Bill, along with other members of that committee, really made sure that it wasn't about them in the room. It was about what was best for the town of Rockland. So my heartfelt thanks to Bill. He was chairman when I got on, and he stayed on while I was chairman. And then he took over I think I talked him into being chairman again. And he was, he taught me a lot, and he'll be sorely missed by the town. Hopefully he stays active.
Yeah.
Motion to accept is
I'll make the motion.
Second. Second.
So a motion to accept with regrets.
Yep.
This resignation. I get a motion and a second. All in favor?
And
He'll be missed.
he
Did a
will
great
be
job.
greatly missed. I do believe that the town moderator appoints members to the finance committee. Is that
Yes.
correct, Mr.
It is
O'Loughlin?
correct, yep.
So we would encourage residents again to come into town hall and fill out committee interest forms. We really would like to encourage volunteerism and get more people involved.
If you've been on the finance committee, you know all the secrets of the town. You'll know every department's budget. You'll just know everything. It's one of the best places to go to learn about your town because everybody comes down and talks about their budget and tells everybody why theirs is more important than the next guy's. And they all are equally important to the town, but it's a great way to come and learn about where the money goes in your town. A lot of people say we waste money, but we don't. We use every dime that we can for good. I guess you want to call it good.
And we have one last town administrator announcement. It's just a thank you to Susan Egan-Tasker, who is the executive assistant for Highway Superintendent Taylor. I get calls all the time for Susan's high level of customer service, and we got a letter from a resident a couple of weeks ago. I believe Susan is here with us this evening, so not to embarrass her, but we just really wanted to give her credit for her outstanding customer service. So in the short time I've been sitting in the front office, I've come to really value when I receive a compliment for our employees who I know are so hardworking, and Susan gets them frequently. But you have the letter in your books. We just wanted to thank Susan for all of her hard work.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it. It's great. We want to be a kinder, gentler town, quite frankly. Okay, selectmen's comments. Comments and opinions expressed by the individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Mr. Mullen.
I'll be brief, imagine that, but this weekend, like it's Bulldog Pride Weekend, hosted by Reimagine Rockland, will be kicking off at 10 o'clock out in front of Town Hall, where they fall cleanup of Union Street and the rail trail. Then at 12 o'clock, we'll be having lunch at the library, then unveiling the Soul of Rockland initiative that we worked very hard on over the summer. That would be very exciting. And then on a Sunday morning, I believe at 10 o'clock out of the Senior Center, there's going to be a dog walk, a Bulldog Pride Walk, that will leave from the Senior Center, walk the rail trail and up Union Street and then back to the Senior Center. Like anyone who's interested, wants to join any of the three efforts or just learn more about Reimagine Rockland and what we're trying to do, you can log on to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Reimagine Rockland. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
That's all.
That was a record.
Mr. O'Loughlin.
Yeah. And it wasn't what I had, which is a first. So I just want to congratulate Jim Simpson, Jared Valenzola, Kara Nyman, as well as Brian Kane and Rich Penny for obtaining the required number of signatures to make it onto the ballot for the November 6th special election for the Board of Selectmen for the 2 seats. I just want to also just take a second, and I know this is something that I probably don't have to say to this field. I just want to remind everyone that as a town, we've been dragged through the mud over the last, 5 or 6 months, and I just hope that everyone in this race runs a respectful campaign to each other, and more importantly, respectful to the town. There's no reason for any attacks on Facebook. There's no reason for any destruction of anybody's personal character at this point. We've been through it all as a town, and I think, if everybody respects each other and the town, this will be a fun election season for all you guys, especially you guys in the audience tonight. So that's all I have.
And I'm going to be brief also. I really would like to just thank Father Jim Hickey for being an overall great guy and a great American and a great asset to the town of Rockland. Him and I always spar together a little bit about dogma and things like that, but he's really a great human being. He really is a great human being, and when he first came here, he was different. And a lot of people didn't like different. People don't like different, but you know something? He stuck with the people of Rockland, and the people came in and learned to really like the guy and see that he's really a decent human being all the way around. And I always tell him he's a great American. Thanks, Father Hickey. And hopefully we're going to make him Rockland's best. We're going to do that? How about a motion?
So, I'll make a motion to nominate Father Hickey as one of Rockland's best.
I'll second that motion.
And to hopefully have invite Father Hickey to one of our esteemed meetings in the next month or so, and to be able to present that to him.
Be excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Father Hickey, you're always welcome here. All right, thank you, everyone. Now we're going to, number 11 is the executive session to discuss strategy regarding collective bargaining, to discuss strategy and preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, to discuss litigation strategy, an executive session pursuant to GLC 30A Section 21A7 to comply with or act under authority of any general law or special law, specifically GLC 30A Sections 22F and G regarding the review of executive session minutes. We also had a discussion of the town accountant, but we're going to table the vote on that due to he hasn't signed the paper yet. That's it.
Session not to reconvene.
Not to reconvene.
So I'll make a motion to enter executive session for the purposes Chairman Ryan stated, not to reconvene.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. O'Laughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Mullen?
Yes, aye.
And I am also. Thank you very much, everyone, for showing up tonight.